Hi students, welcome to Year 11 Biology and Module 1, Cells as the Basis of Life. This is video number 12 and we're going to be looking at energy in cells. In this particular video we're going to be trying to focus on the cell requirements, which are going to focus on suitable forms of energy, and we're going to obviously just in passing talk about both light and chemical energy in complex cells. Now hopefully when you see something like this, your mind is going straight to processes like photosynthesis and also respiration as two key processes that are part of energy exchange in cells. And of course, there are a couple that we're going to look at just in an introductory kind of a sense in this first video. Because of the process of active transport, we've already encountered this very important ATP molecule in the past, adenosine triphosphate. It's the energy currency of the cell. It's the form of energy that the cell can use for those sorts of active processes, and also for a large number of chemical processes, metabolic processes that occur in cells. The chemical energy is actually stored in the bonds that hold the molecule together. And because of the nature of this molecule, it can continue to be recycled as long as we can continue to provide an energy source for that. So glucose is something that most, heterotrophic organisms need in order to be able to use that energy, or at least have that chemical form of energy available, which they can then convert into a more useful form, which is what ATP is. And it's the process of respiration that's critical to that conversion of chemical energy from glucose into ATP. It's probably worth at this stage, even though we'll focus on these terms a little bit later in the course when we look at ecology, but living organisms can be broken up really into one of two groups, autotrophs or heterotrophs. And troph is a word that basically relates to feeding. So autotrophs basically are capable of feeding themselves, and that's organisms that can convert the light energy from the sun into a chemical form through photosynthesis. Heterotrophs have to eat their food. They've got to eat the energy that they need. They've got to consume that glucose or get it into their cells in one way or another in order to have that energy source available to them that they can then convert into ATP. The actual ATP molecule itself is quite complex, and it's beyond the chemistry, I believe, of the biology course for us to go into this. But the key with this is that we have a quite complex sort of little sugar molecule over the top here. And then we've got three phosphate groups here, and here. And it's the bonds between them that are the high energy bonds. And it's one of those that breaks and releases the energy that's held in that bond that can therefore be used for different types of chemical reactions within cells. And you see that the form that we get from the ATP is the ADP and an inorganic phosphate group, and I have talked about that on a previous video. So the first of these very key processes, which we will look at in a little bit more detail later on, is photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is the process that plant cells use in order to convert the energy of sunlight into a chemical form that is readily usable, not just by plants, but by all living things. So carbon dioxide and water are used as raw materials. Light is the energy source to convert those into glucose, which is a 6-carbon sugar, and oxygen, and 6s on each of those for those of you who are chemists who like balanced equations. This occurs in the chloroplasts, and of course the pigments have a very important role to play, and we will briefly touch on the process of photosynthesis in a later video. The important thing about photosynthesis is an endothermic reaction, and we're starting to look at this little prefix on a couple of occasions now. And endo means in, so it means, and thermic is obviously related to heat, so heat actually has to be taken in. It's the energy that has to be put into this reaction from sunlight that enables it to occur. That input of energy is light energy, and that allows the chloroplasts, or at least the membranes, the pigments that are present within the chloroplasts, to be involved in this process of conversion of carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen. Now, we write this as a general or overall equation, and it simplifies a lot of things by writing it in this form, because it's actually very complex processes. It has at its absolute minimum two different processes, one which occurs in the light and one which doesn't have to occur in the light, and that's called anything from the dark phase, the carbon fixing phase, a few different names for it. And as I say, we'll look at them all in a little bit of detail later on in a future video. Suffice it to say, at this point, this is the process that allows us to take advantage of light energy and convert it into chemical energy. It's then respiration that changes that chemical energy that's locked up within glucose into a form that's much more easily used by cells, which is ATP. And the important thing about respiration and photosynthesis is when you write them down, they look like the reverse of each other. And if you think about them that way, then it's probably an easy way to keep them in your mind. So for respiration, glucose and oxygen this time, the products of the photosynthesis reaction are the reactants of the respiration reaction, and they produce carbon dioxide and water, which is the reverse. The important thing about this, of course, is ATP is also produced as a result of these processes, and whilst we don't have light as our source, we certainly have a lot of other chemicals that are associated with this process. And as we looked at for photosynthesis, this is a general simplification overview of the process of respiration, and there are a number of steps associated with respiration as well, and also there's a lot of different chemicals called enzymes that are part of the process of respiration, which is occurring in the mitochondria. As you might expect, if photosynthesis is an endothermic reaction which requires energy in order for it to occur, the reverse of that process makes sense for it to be an exothermic reaction, which means energy is released in this process, and that's the ATP form that we get, that energy locked up in, that's then available for other processes. So this is just a very quick overview of the energy that's available in cells. Hopefully it gives you a little bit of a starting point, also a link point. I'm sure photosynthesis and respiration are not new processes to you, so they're ones that you already have looked at in the past, and so we will look at these in a little bit more detail as we go further through this course. Just a little intro now onto the forms of energy that are used by cells. Thanks for watching.